So you know that there's SAM, surface-to-air missiles, up there, and here we go, back to the book. Gary, that's your Rio, sitting behind you in the plane. Right. You say, Gary, do you see it? And he says, I don't see a thing, Charlie. We had both seen SAMs before. They resembled flying white telephone poles with huge 4th of July sparklers spraying silvery orange glows from their tails. If we saw them in time, we could dodge the missiles by letting them close in at the last second, pulling the plane into a high G barrel roll, 6 Gs or so, and letting the poles pass harmlessly underneath. Because of its design, the missile could not follow us without cracking in two. But we didn't see it. Boom. I felt a thump in the empennage, the aft section of the airplane. Red instrument lights jumped across the panel, indicating that I had 2 engines on fire. That wasn't good. This plane only had 2 engines. I yanked the throttles back to idle, and the bird seemed to come to an immediate halt in midair. Charlie, we're hit. How bad is it? She's still flying. Then the aircraft started to roll, and while I madly scanned the instruments, I looked up and found that the F-4 had suddenly overturned. Ground was where there should have been sky, and the nose was heading downward, ripping air at 500 knots. The altimeter needle collapsed to 4,000, then 3,500, then 3,000. We had to get out, but being inverted, we would be rocketed by the ejection seat right into the rice paddies. I had to roll the plane upright. I tried the stick. It was frozen. The only manual control was the rudder pedal, not normally used to roll an aircraft. I stepped on it as hard as I could, adrenaline surging through my veins. The plane shuddered once, and again, slowly, it began to right itself. Rear-view mirrors reflected a screaming fireball, 12,000 pounds of flaming gasoline and 30,000 pounds of fissionable aircraft. You want to eject? No, wait a minute, I shouted back. The plane struggled. Then the sky was where it should be. Gary, let's go. I jerked my face curtain to eject. The rocket slammed me out of the aircraft. I tumbled a couple times, and the chute caught just as advertised. All kinds of debris filled the air around me as wadding from the shells whistled by. Son of a gun, they've bagged my airplane. Now they're after me. I winced at the concussions from the exploding shells, sonic booms battering my eardrums, rockets of heavy smoke clouded the sky. Gary and I had ejected so near the ground, however, that enemy guns could train on us for only a short time. I checked my parachute canopy. It looked good, torn in only a couple of places. I thought of escape, but where? Looking away, I saw my buddies and their aircraft blending into the horizon. Below, my landing zone was nothing but barren rice paddies. Down to my left, a huge cloud of black smoke billowed at the outskirts of a peasant hamlet, punctuating a row of 4 or 5 huts. My plane. Had it wiped out a family? If so, the villagers would certainly be unhappy. I wasn't happy either. I hadn't intended that to happen. I later learned that the plane had impacted just beyond the last shack on the road. There was precious little time before I would touch down, and I had much to be done. I grabbed my 2-way radio and tried to contact Gary, but I received no answer. Then I called my skipper. Linfield lead. This is Linfield 2. We've got 2 good shoots. We're going to be all right. Request no SAR effort. And SAR is search and rescue, for those of you that don't know. And when I read that part right there, I stopped in my tracks, because here you are, you're shot down, you're in a parachute, you're going to obviously be landing in these rice paddies surrounded by enemy, and you had the wherewithal to understand that if you requested for search and rescue to come and get you, it was just going to get more people killed.
Yeah. And that had happened before. I had seen that happen, and we were so far behind enemy lines. I mean, it was impossible. Jolly Green was the call sign for the helicopter that would come get us off the aircraft carrier. and they would have to go through probably 75 or 100 miles of enemy territory before they ever got to me. And I was in such a populated area that I could see that I was going to be captured immediately. And so to get those guys, to put them in harm's way was kind of silly. So that's why I did that.
When, I've experienced a couple times in combat where things slow down and the time starts to really be different than it normally is, and they say it's because you get this big adrenaline dump and all of your sensors, all your perception awakens to such a high point that things actually slow down. Did you experience any of that when you were once that SAM missile hit? I
did. Yes, it was almost like slow motion, and I remember thinking, this is unreal. I've never had this happen to me before, but it was almost like I was in a movie and everything was slowing down in my life, and I tried to sense every possible thing because, of course, I'm thinking escape now, trying to get out of here in some way. And so I'm trying to memorize all the little roads I could see and all the little trees and all the little huts and where are they and where am I, that situational awareness.
How far from the water or the ocean were you at this point?
I was 75 miles.
Oh, so no chance of that.
No chance. We were on the outskirts of Hanoi, the capital city. And that was the bad news, good news. The bad news was that I was going to be captured immediately. There was no chance whatsoever. I mean, they were shooting at me from the ground while I came down. The good news was I didn't have to go very far to a formalized prison camp like a lot of the guys did. You had Bill Reeder on this on your podcast, and he was dragged for weeks. And because he was captured in South Vietnam. Right. The guys that were in Laos or Cambodia who were brought to our prison camps were all just really torn up, not just because of the enemy, but just because of the rigors of the travel. So,
and you're gonna talk about this. You talk about it in the book, but just to kind of point out the fact that 2 minutes earlier, you were part of this giant, powerful force with a multi-million-dollar, aircraft under your command as a 24-year-old, as part of this group that of many, many multi-million-dollar with this huge destructive power, launching off of these ships and airfields, and to go from having all that to now you're under a parachute and you're about to have all of that just absolutely taken away.
It was a major transition in my life. But unlike someone who's diagnosed with cancer,
right?
Or unlike someone who just lost a job, or just lost a child, or just had a car accident. I mean, that's there are similarities in normal civilian life, I think, that can be just as impactful as being blown out of the sky.
You're floating down to earth, and I'm going back to the book. Then I bowed my head. Well, Lord, here I am. I'm really in a bind now, and I need some help. Give me strength, and give Anne strength. I was surprised at how calm I was when I should have been panic-stricken. But there was too much to think about and do. I couldn't let myself become irrational. It would all be different now. I tried to envision myself in this new world and prepare for it. I had a lot going for me. I was in good physical condition, and I could probably withstand torture. I didn't believe I would be killed because I was too much of a blue chip for the enemy. Which, again, for you to say, you're shot down, you're about to land in enemy territory, and your statement is, I had a lot going for me. It's a positive attitude, sir. It's a positive attitude.
Hey, that's your philosophy of saying good.
It is indeed. That's my notes right there.
Yeah, good.
I wrote good. I said, I've thought this before. So you touch down. I plunged backward into the mud and water, trying to get my bearings. I took off my helmet and mask and crawled without direction in the quagmire. With slimy hands, I tried to wipe mud from my eyes. I saw that I was about 10 or 15 yards from an embankment. I looked over to see that Gary, touching down an adjacent patty about 100 yards away, had disappeared behind the 8-foot embankment. A barefoot peasant wearing khaki shorts and t-shirt ran at top speed down the path toward me, grimacing with excitement and anger. Above his head, he waved a double-edged axe with blades about 8 inches long. My instructors never documented that type of weapon. I heard him scream, "Hand up, hand up!" I didn't understand what he meant, and I kept working with my gear and shoot. I had a .38 revolver strapped to my chest, and as long as he stayed in the embankment, I would not touch it. It wasn't long, however, before 10 or 12 more peasants came rushing toward me, yelling and waving their shovels and hoes. Now there was power in numbers, and they charged out in the water after me. I raised my hands away from my body. They started ripping my G-suit, found my survival knife, and proceeded to cut away at the suit and the torso harness. I tried to tell them to use the zippers and even attempted to show them how to do it, but they knocked my hands away. The more certain they were that I was harmless, the meaner they became. The shovel and hoe blades flailed at my body to prove to me that I was their loathed captive. Strangely, the peasants failed to see my revolver, probably because it too was covered with mud, and the .38 rested in my holster at least 3 or 4 minutes before a peasant finally spotted it. He yanked it out of the holster and sloshed a few steps away. A moment later, he returned and screamed for special attention. He fixed the barrel to my head. I could see that at least 2 of the chambers were empty. I had always kept 5 of the 6 chambers loaded, so I knew that he must have removed at least one of the cartridges. There was little I could do as I felt the muddy barrel against my temple. The peasant pulled the trigger. Click. He guffawed and sneaked away, wiping off his unexpected prize. As far as your thoughts about being killed at that moment, did you accept them? Were you thinking, he's not going to do it? What's your attitude at that point?
I never, in the entire experience, I never thought I was going to be killed. And I didn't think so at that moment. Of course, I was very happy when I heard the click of that revolver. but it was actually very encouraging to think that they were going to feign this execution and not go through with it.
Right.
And it was encouraging to me to think that, yeah, they were going to hammer me around and get me pretty bloody, but they probably weren't intentionally going to kill me. I guess I worried more about that they would kill me accidentally than intentionally. And there were 2 or 3 times during the entire experience. One of them was while I was being tortured, how when I felt like I was losing it and I was close to death, and they loosened the ropes because they saw, I think, that I was getting pretty close to death. And so, and that, again, that was good because I thought, all right, this hurts a lot, but it looks like they're not going to kill me. I may wish I was dead, but I don't think they're going to do it.
Now you guys are blindfolded. They capture Gary as well, and you're blindfolded. But at this point, they put this kind of marginal blindfold on you that's not working really well, so you can actually see. And again, I'm going to go to your go ahead and highlight your twisted sense of humor here. So here we go. You're in the back of an old Russian Jeep. Back to the book. Gary was held captive in the Jeep ahead of mine. At the instant I recognized Gary, I started calling hysterically for a doctor to attend to his burned arms. The guards restrained me violently, screaming foreign but distinct warnings to attempt no more communication. I did, however, shout one more thing. I don't know why, unless it was for morale. I shouted out, "These people are 1,000 years behind in blindfolds." And it says later the POWs who were in nearby cells heard you screaming that and still laughed about it. So I'm glad you kept your sense of humor.
Sometimes I look back on that and think that I was in some form of shock.
Right.
Because, I mean, who who would come up with that? Who would write this stuff?